I was recently looking at the group of Nordic flags, and for some reason one of them is a completely different design to all of the others. The majority of the flags are a variation of the Nordic cross, but one of them completely stands out as being a circle, and I'm ashamed to confess I didn't immediately know which country that was. I've obviously since learned that it's Greenland, and I really like the design. I think it's fun and unique, so I'm going to make one. For the fabric I have red and yellow cotton at roughly 200 grams per square metre, so a bit heavier than normal, but I personally like that. The specifications of the design are 12 units high by 18 units long. The diameter of the circle is 8 units, and it's placed 3 units away from the left-hand edge. To translate these units into measurements, you always do that from the flag's height, and I'll be making mine 30 inches high. So I take my 30 inches and divide them by those 12 units, and that gives me the length of 1 unit. I can then times this number by however many units a section is to work out the length of that section. I'll begin by making the background without the circle. From both red and white pieces I will cut out rectangles 18 units long by 6 units high. And for both short edges and one long edge I will add a 1-inch seam allowance. For the remaining long edge I add 3/8 of an inch on the white piece and double this on the red piece. I lay the white piece down first and the red on top of it. And the red needs to be that 3/8 of an inch lower than the white one. And these are then just pinned together for sewing. The first row of stitching is done 3/8 of an inch away from the red piece's edge. When that's done, I then just simply fold the longer white allowance around the shorter red one and top stitch along its edge. The goal with this seam is obviously just to fold away all of the raw edges on both sides. And that's the base of the flag ready. The circle doesn't touch any of the flag's edges, so next I will move on to finish those off. Beginning with the right hand edge, I will fold over that 1-inch seam allowance and iron it flat. I then fold this inch in half to conceal the raw edge and iron it again. Then I just add some pins to hold it in place and then sew it with 2 rows of top stitching. I then repeat this whole process for the long top and bottom edges, leaving the left hand edge open for the time being. The base of the flag is now finished, so with my leftover red and white pieces I'll begin making the circle. I lay both pieces next to each other because I'll draw and cut both pieces at the same time. Both diameters are 8 units long, and from the center of these I can draw out my half circles. For the whole circle's edge I add 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and also 3/8 on the red piece's diameter, and double this on the white piece's diameter. This time the red piece goes down first and the white piece on top, and again staggered by that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. These are also again then just pinned together and sewn together with those double seams as demonstrated earlier. And that's the circle sewn, nice and easy. To prepare the circle to be attached to the rest of the flag, I will now iron over that 3/8 of an inch all the way around the edge. Doing this just makes the sewing much easier and neater for later on. I now have all of the pieces of the flag ready, so I will measure those 3 units away from the left hand edge and begin placing the circle. To hold the circle in place, I just add lots and lots of pins all the way around the edge. To attach the circle, it's just a case of top stitching as near to the edge as you can get. It can be fiddly at times, so just go slowly and take your time. This is how the end result looks, and again it's important to get the stitching as near to the edges as you can possibly get. You'll notice at the moment it's still only a one-sided flag, so I flip it over with the front side facing down. From my row of stitching, I mark 2 times that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance towards the centre, and then carefully cut all the way around along this line, being very careful not to cut the fabric below. I now once again have a top seam allowance which is twice as wide as the one below it. So I simply fold the longer one around the short one and top stitch along the edge as I did before. Again, this can be fiddly to sew on a curve, so just take your time. And this is the end result. All of the raw edges are nicely tucked away and sewn on both sides. The last piece to make for this flag is the strip of fabric on the left-hand edge, which houses the rope or the eyelets. I always like to use a lightweight cotton canvas for this, but feel free to use anything. I measure out the height of my flag plus 1.5 inches on either side, and I'll go with a 2.5 inch width. I then add a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both long edges, and that's it finished. With the flag facing upwards, I place this strip down along the open edge, and I have ironed over one of the seam allowances for later on, and I add some pins to hold it. For the extra 1.5 inches on either side, it's just folded around to the back and pinned as normal. To attach it, I just sew along that 1/2 inch line as normal, and then I can trim off all of the excess. The extra 1.5 inches can then be pulled upwards and just sewn to itself along the raw edge. Now with the flag facing downwards, I just fold this strip in half and pin it in place. And this is sewn in place with 2 rows of top stitching. You can do more rows if you want to, but 2 is usually more than enough. Now moving on to the hanging fixtures, I will be using metal eyelets for this one, which are just hammered on. I've already cut round holes in both corners, so I just need to assemble the various pieces and hammer.